The day they lowered me into the ground, my husband was holding another woman's hand. I know this because Zara told me later after everything, after the fire sale of the company, after the lawsuits, after Marcus stood in front of a federal judge and tried to explain where $11 million had gone. She told me he didn't even cry. He just stood there, in a gray suit I'd bought him for our anniversary, watching the casket, and then he turned and whispered something in her ear and she smiled. That image has lived in me for 6 years. I have used it like fuel. My name is Elena Voss Whitfield. I was declared legally dead on a Tuesday in October. I came back on a Wednesday 6 years later, and I made sure they all felt it. Welcome, get comfortable. This one takes a little time to build, but I promise you it pays off. Marcus and I married when I was 29. He was charming the way certain men are charming, completely effortlessly, and in a way that asks nothing of itself. He had ideas, big, sweeping, expensive ideas. And I had the capital, the connections, and the quiet competence to make them real. I was the one who built Whitfield Capital from a 2-desk operation into a mid-sized investment firm managing $200 million in assets. I was the one who cultivated the client relationships, structured the deals, hired the talent. Marcus was the face. He was very good at being the face. What I didn't know, what I spent 4 years not knowing, was that Marcus and my business partner, Diane Chen, had been building something else entirely. Something quieter, something that required me to be gone. The accident happened on a Thursday. I was driving back from a client meeting in the mountains, a stretch of road I'd taken a dozen times. The guardrail gave way. I found out later it had been tampered with, though proving it took years, and the car went off the edge into a river basin 40 feet below. They searched for 3 days, didn't find a body, declared me missing. Then, after 6 months, with paperwork that moved through the courts with suspicious efficiency, they had me declared dead. Marcus inherited everything. Whitfield Capital, the house, the accounts. And Diane moved into my corner office approximately 11 days after the declaration was filed. I know this because I was alive. A family of hikers found me 2 days after the accident. I had a fractured collarbone, 3 broken ribs, a concussion, and hypothermia. I was airlifted to a small regional hospital 3 counties away, admitted under a Jane Doe designation because I had no ID, no phone, nothing. By the time I was coherent enough to give my name, the search had been called off. By the time I could make a phone call, Marcus had already spoken to an attorney. I called the house. He answered on the second ring. Elena, his voice shifted. Something I didn't have a word for then, something I've had many words for since. Marcus, I'm alive, I'm in a hospital in Elena. He said my name again, very carefully. I don't know who this is, but my wife passed away 3 weeks ago. Please don't call this number again. He hung up. I sat in that hospital bed for a long time afterward. The kind of long time that rearranges something inside you. The kind that turns grief into architecture. Then I picked up the phone again, and I called the one person I knew Marcus would never think of. Her name was Grace Ackefer. She had been my college roommate, my first investor, and the only person in my life who had consistently refused to like Marcus on the grounds that his handshake was too rehearsed. She answered in 2 rings. It's me, I said. Silence. Elena, her voice cracked. I need help, and I need you not to tell anyone I'm alive, not yet. Another silence. Longer this time. And then Grace Ackefer, who had built her own private equity firm from nothing, said the words that gave me everything. Tell me what you need. What followed was not a movie. I want to be honest about that. There were no disguises, no dramatic reveals in courtrooms with gasping spectators. What there was 6 years of methodical, patient, extraordinarily well-documented work. Grace helped me establish a new legal identity while we gathered evidence. A quiet existence in a city where no one knew the name Elena Whitfield. I was not idle. I had spent 4 years building a firm. I still knew how. Under a different name, with Grace's backing, I started over. Consulting at first. Then a small fund, then a larger one. I was careful. I was precise. I was, if anything, better than I had been before because I had nothing left to lose and I understood now exactly what I was building toward. Marcus, meanwhile, was unraveling. Without me running the operations, Whitfield Capital began to drift. Diane was brilliant at positioning and terrible at execution. They brought in outside managers who didn't understand the client relationships I'd spent years cultivating. By year 3, assets under management had dropped by 40%. By year 4, there were whispers about regulatory irregularities. By year 5, the SEC had opened a preliminary inquiry. I had sent them an anonymous tip, carefully worded, thoroughly documented. I had been documenting for 2 years by then. The moment I chose to come back was not dramatic. It was a Tuesday morning in March. I was sitting in my office, my real office now, 32nd floor, a view of the city I'd once called home, when my attorney called. The SEC has expanded the inquiry, she said. If there's ever a time, Elena, it's now. I thought about Marcus hanging up the phone. I thought about Diane moving into my office in 11 days. I thought about the gray suit. File everything, I said, all of it. My attorney was very good. The kind of very good that takes a decade to become. Within 36 hours, 3 things happened simultaneously. 1. My legal team filed a motion to vacate the death declaration, supported by 6 years of documented existence. Tax records, medical files, corporate registrations, all of it. 2. That same legal team filed a civil suit against Marcus Whitfield and Diane Chen for fraud, wrongful appropriation of assets, and a list of related claims that ran to 4 pages. 3. A journalist I had spoken to, off the record, for 8 months, published a story. The headline was not subtle. Marcus found out the way powerful people always find out when their world is ending, from someone below them, who had heard from someone else, who had seen it on a screen. He called my attorney's office 17 times in 4 hours. She let them go to voicemail. He called Grace. Grace answered, listened to him for approximately 40 seconds and said, "She said to tell you. She knows about the guardrail?" Then she hung up. He showed up at my building. I'll give him this. He looked terrible. Expensive suit, bad skin, the eyes of a man who hadn't slept since Tuesday. He stood in the lobby and told the front desk he needed to see Elena Voss. The receptionist called upstairs. I told her to let him wait 20 minutes. Then I went down. He saw me come off the elevator and something happened to his face. A collapse, almost, like the scaffolding gave way. "Elena, Marcus." I said his name the way he had once said mine, carefully, precisely, like a door closing. "My attorneys have asked me not to discuss the case with you directly, you know that? You were alive." He said it like an accusation. "You were alive the whole time." "Yes, you could have, what?" I asked. "Come home." "After you told me not to call?" I let that sit for a moment. "I gave you an opportunity that day, Marcus. You made a choice." He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. "Have a good day," I said. "Your attorneys are going to have a very busy week." I walked back to the elevator. I did not look back, not because I was being cinematic about it, because I genuinely did not need to. The civil case settled 14 months later. I won't share the number. My attorneys advised against it, and I respect that, but I will say that Whitfield Capital ceased to exist as an independent entity. The assets were liquidated. The regulatory findings resulted in a separate proceeding that I had no involvement in but followed closely. Diane Chen lost her Series 65 license. She's in insurance now. I heard this from someone who heard it from someone else. I did not go looking for it. Marcus pleaded to a reduced charge, community service, restitution, no prison, which I won't pretend didn't sting. But my attorney reminded me that I hadn't come back for his prison sentence. I had come back for my life. She was right. The guardrail, the investigation into that took longer and the findings were inconclusive. There are things I know and cannot prove. I have made my peace with that, mostly. 6 years after being declared dead, I rang the opening bell at a securities exchange. My firm, my real firm, under my real name, had just completed a merger that made the front page of 3 financial publications. Grace stood next to me. She was wearing a yellow blazer that she'd bought specifically because she said it photographed well for revenge. I laughed harder than I had in years. There was a photographer there who asked me afterward how it felt. I thought about it. "Like breathing," I said. "Like the first real breath in a very long time." Here is what nobody tells you about being buried alive, metaphorically, literally, in every way that matters. The people who do it always believe you'll stay down. That's their first mistake. Their second is believing that the woman they erased stayed the same woman. That 6 years of starting over, of rebuilding from nothing, of sitting in a hospital bed listening to a dial tone, hadn't made her into something they were entirely unprepared for. Marcus thought he was erasing a wife. He was sharpening a weapon. They told me I was gone. I let them believe it. I went quiet and I went to work and I came back with documentation, an attorney, a firm, and 6 years of compound interest on my patience. They gave me a grave. I turned it into a foundation. Thank you for listening. If this story found you today, maybe you needed to hear it. Subscribe so you never miss what comes next. And remember, the quietest people in the room are often the ones you should have been watching all along.